If I haven't given enough, I don't know what to say to anyone. Like, I have given so much R&B. I have just consistently put out R&B projects, mixtapes, albums. And if at some point I don't allow myself to just do something solely for me and experiment and flip the shit on its head, then as an artist, who am I?
Kehlani, welcome to Apple Music One. Great to have you in London.
Thank you.
As well. A new album, Crash, out now. And we're going to get into the making of that album shortly. But first, I want to talk about a note that you wrote for your fans.
Yeah.
And on that note, you wrote about this album freeing you, this being the project that freed you, which I found very powerful. So I wonder if you could share with us, what were you freed from when you made this album?
The year that I started the album, last year, I moved to my hometown, started like getting closer to my family. We started making the album in my hometown, and then a lot of the parameters that I created for myself of safety and to feel like this is how I want certain things to go, a lot of those were broken. My spiritual life completely changed. My familial life completely changed as I started making this album and like really finding out, you know, not to be astrological, but it's my Saturn return as well. So like that is the years of like shattering what you know as like parameters and things like that. So it's a really long-winded answer to say like every single thing in my world flipped upside down, and I kind of just followed making this album through those changes.
We're going to talk about some of those shifts in your life to the extent that you're comfortable with. But first, I want to talk about the sound of this album because it's genre defying.
Yeah.
We've got Omar Lay on there.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Jill Scott. We've got a Christina Aguilera flip.
Mm-hmm.
The first song sounds like it could be a throwback hit from the Carpenters.
I love that.
Was that an intentional decision, or were you just experimenting?
I was just experimenting, and then the only reason that it came all together the way that it came all together is because I had to like tie it in, if that makes sense. I just knew that I wanted to have a lot of fun on tour with this album. I knew I wanted to make it specifically for the rooms that I was going to be playing because it'll be my biggest tour so far. And that was kind of the leading force, but also like I was playing with new instruments. I was meeting new people. I was working with different producers. The last couple albums I had pretty locked in with like the same couple producers, but this time I had like this whole arrangement of different people, and I made the album in a bunch of different places. So that also feels like that because of that. We did different camps. I did San Diego. I went from San Diego. I actually started in the Bay, then I went to San Diego. We went to New York. We went to Dominican Republic. We went to Vegas. We went back to San Diego, and then we went back to LA. And so maybe that sounds like the travels.
This album is a mashup of experiences as well, not just sounds.
Yeah, for sure.
Were you making this as soon as the last album ended?
No, I started this album last July. So last summer, I think, kicked it all off, and making it through the perfect like surfy summer into like fall, and then like even understanding what it felt like to be in those places during winter was weird, and we were figuring it out. And then all the world started shifting and all the changes and things happening in the world, and trying to figure out what finishing an album while all these things are going on felt like and what that meant. And yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a real, really intricate journey.
When you're making these songs, you're in these studio sessions and you're playing with sonics and you're making songs that you could line dance to, and you're making songs that have got like these trappy beats. Do you ever second guess how that music's going to be received? Are there any reservations about people who maybe only kind of rock with you for the R&B, or they're only aware of the R&B? Are you ever concerned about how they will receive it?
I definitely had a moment. I had to have a talk with myself where I was like, because I initially set off for this album to be my self-titled. I started off being like, wow, it's my self-titled. A lot of my references were like the women in R&B that shaped, you know, why I sing and things like that. And as I started getting really playful and trying a bunch of different things and leaning more into what I listened to versus what initially started my journey, it was a completely different, it just took a 180. And I did have a moment where I was like, damn, I remember talking about it online, and I said like, it's gonna beat, it was good until it wasn't, and it was gonna be different than it was good until it wasn't. But like, I don't know how people are gonna receive that, because that was an R&B album. And I knew people were gonna be expecting an R&B album. But then I thought, I'm 7 projects in. Like,
that's crazy.
If I haven't given enough, I don't know what to say to anyone. Like, I have given so much R&B. I have just consistently put out R&B projects, mixtapes, albums. And if at some point I don't allow myself to just do something solely for me and experiment and flip the shit on its head, then as an artist, who am I? And I've definitely seen that in the response of people either being like, what was that? That was a hot mess. That was crazy. And I expected, like, it's never going to beat what I expected. And then there's people who are like, this is actually the best project of your life. This is the most you've ever been. I really adore this. And it's kind of this cool polarizing thing happening that I'm not mad about.
Do you block that out when you get negative reviews? Is it something you just shut out and you cater to the people that do appreciate it? Or is it something that you inevitably take on?
Well, I think art is subjective. There's concerts and festivals that I would be like, I would want to rip my ears off going to this concert and festival, that people at that concert and festival are like, this is the best day of my life. I'm like, I would replay this day every single day. You just can't, like, everything isn't for everyone. If there was art that was for everyone, then we would be so many successful artists and they would have consistently successful, there's artists I'm sure we both could think of that were like, how are they so famous? I mean, we can't fathom it. And then there's artists where nobody knows about them and we're like, wow, why aren't they where Beyonce is? So I don't take it in, especially not while I'm creating. And then once I put it out, I try to just remember, like, exactly what I just said, is that it's just subjective. It's just art.
Of course, and it belongs to the world.
Exactly.
There's so little you can do once you've put it out.
It's not mine no more.
Let's talk about some of those shifts in your life, because this is the second album we've had from you since you shared with the world that you exclusively date women.
Yeah.
But it feels like the first time that the songs have really reflected that.
Yeah, really? Didn't feel like that in the last one?
It felt like you were really leaning into it.
Yeah.
On this album. How freeing is that from a songwriting perspective when you're writing music that is so authentic to the life that you're living?
I think the funniest and biggest difference was working with, like, the writers that I work with and being like, stop writing this for me like I'm writing about boys. We're coming up with lines together and then they say something and I was like, no, I have to say it like this. So then we're like reformulating all these songs together and I'm like, you see? And they're like, okay. Like, because there is different, structures that people take. But as far as the freeing aspect, in my mind, I could have written these songs about boys in the Sweet Sexy Savage days. In my opinion, this sounds like an elevated version maybe of my first album. And it's not that different in the level of, like, explicitity. Like, I've always been explicit. I've always been as chaotic as I've been and, like, trifling and maybe a little toxic in the lyrics and very honest. But, like, I'm just singing about my actual life. And I also realized that was something I had to remember when the album was coming out. And that's also not for everyone. There's women who want me to sing about men and they don't want to sing along anymore. They don't want to listen because they can't relate. And then there's men who want to hear a woman sing about them and they can't relate anymore. So I already knew my kind of community of listeners was shaping in this, like, very specific kind of way based on how drastic everything was changing. But to me, I'm just happy I don't have to change the lyrics on stage, because performing old music now, I have to change all the lyrics on stage or else it's kind of uncomfortable to sing. So now I get a whole album of shit that's just like, yep, this is exactly what it is. I don't gotta touch it.
But it's incredibly empowering for a whole community of listeners, myself included, to hear you say she and her, and to be speaking very specifically about women's body parts. Like, there's like
coochie music.
Like, there's no coochie music. Love that. Like, there's no mistaking it. It's not ambiguous. It's not leaving a question to be answered. It's very clear. Do you feel the weight of importance that you hold in the queer community now?
Not necessarily. I feel more of a weight on my personhood in the communities that I represent, of just making sure that, like, where I stand, who I am, the things I align myself with are more in line. As far as, like, the music, I don't feel the pressure because, I don't know, I feel like queers are really fun and, like, they'll just be with whatever I say. But I definitely feel the pressure to represent in the way that I represent and just making sure that, like, I'm coming correct and I'm coming in a good, genuine, honest way.
You are very open with your fans, though. You've kind of taken us on this journey, and as you've gone through your self-discovery, you've shared that with us.
Yeah.
Part of that is sharing your relationships.
Yeah.
It's not something that you've shied away from.
Yeah.
Are you ever burnt from that? Do you ever get to a point where you're like, I might start to keep stuff private?
Oh, no, I've been burnt. I've been burnt out for a year now, maybe. I got tired of it real fast. Yeah, I'm definitely probably forever keeping all of that just to myself, just because the amount of opinion, the amount of crossing boundaries, like even when it comes to being in public, or I have seen what my partner has to go through from dealing with someone who is very much public facing and has a spotlight. I have seen, you know, how they treat my exes after we break up. Like there's too many factors that I'm like, this isn't normal. Like this isn't normal, and there's no roadmap to be able to deal with it. I can't really ask anyone like, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Because my situation is so unique. Like I don't really know any cracking lesbians that are older than me that I can be like, hey, when this happened to you, like how did you navigate it?
You've got me now.
I got you. I will be contacting you. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely am gonna I definitely closed a bit of I pulled a shade down, I think, over my personal life for sure.
Does that go against who you innately are though? Because you seem like a lover girl.
I am. I'm a head ass.
Oh yeah.
Not in a bad way, but just like I really do love, and I don't see anything wrong with it. I won't ever be scared to like dust my off and try again. Why not?
We've seen a really outspoken side of you recently. You haven't shied away from speaking out about injustice, about genocide, about war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like it's come from almost a place of duty. Like you felt as though you were responsible, like you needed to speak out about these things, like you were compelled in a way. What was it that made you speak out at a time when so many of your peers, so many artists or people that are visible have found it easier to be silent?
I'm typically outspoken about like anything that I see wrong. Like I've at a smaller scale, and this is just because what's going on right now is so global, so massive, and it's exposing everything that's wrong everywhere. But it's not like it's random. Like it tracks for my entire career. The second I get it, before I had a career, I'm from Oakland, and we're a naturally political place. We're the home of the Black Panthers. Like we were raised politically. I was at Occupy Oakland sleeping in tents when I was in high school. It's just who I am, and I was raised with the understanding that if you have a platform, if you have any amount of eyes, you use it to like turn those eyes to something that needs more eyes. It's super simple to me. And there was a time, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, where a friend of mine asked me to speak about Palestine, and I was just simply not aware. I did speak, and the amount of Zionists that came out of the cuts to be like, you don't know what you're talking about, I deleted the post. When the genocide started, I said, this can never happen again. Like, I can never be shied out of or use the excuse that I didn't know enough or I wasn't educated, so I did my due diligence, got educated, and then was like, I just can't let that happen to me again, because I saw how important it was to the people that did appreciate my post, and I saw how detrimental it was to them when I was not bullied out of, but like I got scared out of, you know, continuing to speak. So I definitely feel like it's a duty, and I don't really have like a soft temperament with that. I do feel like everybody with a platform is responsible. I do feel like everybody, where the only reason we survive and we thrive in industries is because of the people. So when the people turn around and ask us to give back and to look back, and we can't do that, it doesn't make any sense.
You talk about before how, you know, coming out and speaking about women maybe shifted, maybe in some ways tightened the walls of your fandom, people that couldn't relate. You talk about how when you shift sonics and you change sounds, maybe some people feel alienated and they can't connect because it's not R&B. And then talking about this, when you speak out about Palestine, or you speak out about issues and it perhaps alienating people that don't have political views that align with you. You don't mollycoddle your career in any way. You don't seem kind of precious about your fame, where some people will be like, I need to preserve, you know, my image. What is success to you then? Because it seems as though you're not scared to lose people.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've done a lot of the things that were on my dream list. I retired my mother. My daughter can go to good schools. I'm not homeless. I think that's a big difference. And I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have a crazy story, but I had such a drastic jump from nothing to something. And it wasn't fast either, but it's just a massive difference of the life I'm afforded now than how I grew up or where I was when I got picked up either. That I'm grateful for what I have. I don't sit here and dwell on what I don't have or like what it could be, because I'm super hyper focused on what I do, whether that's the fans or what the fans have given me and brought me and how they changed my life. So I just kind of focus there.
There was kind of this 2-year period between albums,
Mm-hmm.
between where we are now and where we were with the last project.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't on socials in that time.
Oh no.
You weren't doing the Twitter thing.
Yeah.
What were you doing in your life?
I was surfing. I bought a van. I did a lot of like driving to drivable places to surf. Hung out a lot with my kid. Painted every room in my house a different color when I felt like it. I don't know. I lived a lot of real life, which is what makes it so hard to like dive back into these runs of like, all right, it's time to go do my job. But luckily, as I'm getting older, like I'm really finding the balance of like how I can tailor and create this life to include much more of that one, to where I really love where I'm at. Like people go through this thing with me all the time where they're like, you could be so much bigger and you could be doing this and you need to play the game and you need to go here. And I'm like, maybe we should consider that I really love the way I'm doing it and that I'm super happy the way I go about things, and like the things I do participate in are fantastic for me, and just kind of like that mentality. So during those 2 years, I was just making more music and relishing in what I was doing before, and just really trying to grasp and create that outline of what I want life to look like, so that as I headed into another period of time like this one, I can take that outline with me and make sure that it all aligns.
You mentioned people that say you should be bigger.
Yeah, all the time. They say it all the time.
Does that ever like sit with you? Does that ever echo when you're alone and you think, maybe I should be bigger?
Well, I don't really know what that means. Like, I don't know what they mean by bigger. It's another one of those conversations of like, I know too much. The amount of rooms I would despise being in because they don't align with me, or like the conversations where I wouldn't be able to hold my tongue, or the moments where I'm like, this is crazy. Y'all don't think this is crazy? And I wouldn't be able to do that. I have been invited to things where I was in the car on the way there and was like, you know what? He knows. He's laughing because he knows. I got dressed. I said, you know what? This is going to be the time. I'm just going to get in the car and I'm just going to go. And I get halfway to the thing. And I was like, yeah, it just doesn't feel like me. I don't know. It doesn't feel like I'm into it. I don't align with it. Like, I just learned too much about this. Like, I can't. And then you get online and it's like, Kehlani doesn't get invited to da-da-da-da-da. So she is da-da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, it's so interesting how different, the perspective is. And that's not to say that I get invited to everything, because I don't. I am in a very interesting spot where I have a really core fan base, and it has been a little hard to get over that hurdle of like, if there's a next level that needs to be reached. But my tours get bigger every time. More people come out. The albums, they do what they do. And I have fun. And like, that's what I prioritize.
And it seems as though you don't actually aspire to continue to outdo some idea of success.
7 projects in.
You seem like you're really content.
I'm chilling.
You got
I'm
your
chilling
van.
so hard.
You got your kid.
Yeah.
It seems like you're playing the fame game in a really nice way.
Yeah.
Where you have the success, but there's a degree of normality to your life.
I prioritize that. I think the fame game has almost taken me out a couple times. Like, there was a couple times where I was like, genuinely, I also have like real diagnosed mental health issues that like are very prevalent, that like have been there my entire life, that I am gratefully and thankfully medicated for, that like I have to navigate. So I cannot live a life that does not align with keeping me sane. It doesn't align with keeping me in that middle ground and that on track. And if I let the opinions and the sways of what other people think I should be doing throw me off that, then now not only am I super triggered and going through it, but then I'm having the other part of my mental beating me up going, you don't even like this. You don't even want this. This doesn't even make you happy. And that combined is just a recipe for mental illness disaster.
I want to talk about something that made me really happy, which was the Cater to You mix of After Hours, which of course stemmed from a fan-made mashup, which went viral.
Shout out TikTok.
Online. To what extent then has your fandom become an A&R? Like, how much do you listen?
I think
to what they
fandoms
say?
are A&Rs in general. I also think they're record labels. I think they all work at Def Jam. I seen a tweet that said that. I seen a tweet that said every fan in the world now works at Def Jam, and I'm like, okay, I feel that. I don't know. I feel like that came about super naturally. Like that just started rising, and then I sent it to my label and they were like, let's reach out to them and get it done officially. And I couldn't believe it got cleared and it worked. And I think we're seeing a turn in general. I mean, we've been seeing it. It's the whole conversation of if TikTok is murking the industry or if it's helping and whatnot. And me personally, I'm all for the mashups because it also helps the DJ who did it. It's also really cool for them. Like DJing is its own art. It's its own like competitive sport. It's like it's a whole thing. I can't do it. So I really respect whoever does it. And shout out the guy that did the mashup. I really wish I could quote his name right now. I do not remember, but he's on my social media. I appreciate him very much.
It's been amazing to speak to you today. I first interviewed you back in 2017, right?
Okay.
So you were like, you were in your early 20s and now you're in the final year of your 20s.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
You've grown so much since then.
Mm-hmm.
Just your sense of self-worth, assurance. I remember when you had a hood up.
I was probably high as hell.
You had your hood up and I was like, she doesn't even want to be here. And I talk to you now and you feel so comfortable in your skin.
Yeah.
What would you tell young Kehlani now that you've learned in your 20s?
I would probably say that everything around you is going to change, but keep focusing on strengthening the inner voice of like what you know you want. Because there was so many moments where like I was very easily swayed about anything. And I'm talking about every area of my life. Everybody could have been like, this isn't good and this is good and this is what. And I was like, okay. Just trying to like keep everything afloat and keep everybody happy. And like the people pleasing, like that is some seriously traumatic, you know. And if I could just look at myself and be like, you actually know exactly what you want and you know exactly what you're doing, and like put up those parameters, learn your boundaries, learn yourself, learn your body, and just like rock with that and stand in it, then I feel like I would have had an easier time. So
amazing. Kehlani, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Dotty Show.
Thank you.